There. Hello. Welcome to our mini class today. We're just going to increase some light here. There we go. Welcome. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're with me. As we are going to launch into this little introduction to constitutional iridology, one of the things that I really want you to remember is that iridology is a learned skill. It's not the kind of thing you're going to pick up from a bunch of free webinars or from social media or from even reading a book. In order to become really proficient at iridology, you need to be trained. You need the right background, which would be anatomy and physiology, and you need to be able to work through cases, get feedback, be mentored in order for you to become super proficient at iridology. I get a lot of people asking to join my private Facebook group who express the concern that they've tried to teach themselves iridology from reading a book or from watching YouTube videos, and they've gotten frustrated and they're wondering if iridology is a legitimate thing. I can tell you, I've been there back in the early days, and I know that it doesn't work. And that's how I know that the only way to learn iridology well is with an instructor who will coach you and mentor you and walk you through cases and hold your feet to the fire and make you get it right, right? And so that's a part of what we're going to be working with today as we introduce you to iridology. Now, we are typically a very small group here, and so it's really important that you play with me in my sandbox. And the reason I say that is the more you interact with me in the chat box, the more you're going to get out of me. Right, and I'm just going to set this up. There we go. So you should be able to drop messages into your chat box for me to see and to play with you. So the first thing I want to know is how many of you already have some iridology training under your belt? If you've got some iridology training already completed, like you've actually whether it's reading books or you've taken a class or you've watched a bunch of YouTube videos, let me know in the chat box if you've got some training already under your belt. That's going to help me to know how deep I can go or how very intro I need to keep this. All right, so drop that in the chat box. You should be able to put comments in there because I've set those settings up. Let me know. Do you have iridology training? And so it can be just a simple yes, I've got training, or no, I don't have training. All right. And again, the more you play with me in that chat box, the more you're going to get out of me. That's just how the game works. I know it takes a few seconds for those messages to come through. A little bit of training there. Okay, thank you so much. And I would also like to know, do you feel confident in using the training you've got? So if you've got training, do you feel confident? If you do, just put the word confident in there. Glynis has no training. Fantastic. Glynis, you are so in the right place. Who else wants to weigh in on this? All right, let's move forward. I do have a class to teach at 12 o'clock, so we do need to make sure we get done on time. All right, so a little bit of introduction. My name is Judith Cobb. I'm a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and a certified level 3 instructor. There are now 8 certified level 3 instructors in the world. I was one of the first 3. And so there we have it. These badges have dates on them because as an instructor and as an iridologist with IPA, we are required to upgrade our skills every 2 years. And when we have provided proof that we have been kept current with those skills, they issue us a new badge with new dates on it. So I've actually been an iridology instructor with IPA for about 6 years now, and taught iridology for years before that, before affiliating with IPA. And again, master herbalist and a natural nutrition practitioner, and these are my the groups that I'm affiliated with there. Just putting a little plug in, the next live course of dynamic iridology will be starting on June the 8th. And if you're a health professional, that means you've got an anatomy and physiology course under your belt already. and you want to learn iridology, just keep the information I'm sharing with you today tucked into the back of your brain, and we need to be in touch then to discuss moving forward and discuss whether dynamic iridology is the right way for you to move forward or not. Just before we start looking at iridology and eyes, I wanted to share this from one of my course graduates, Joyce Lee. She's a certified esthetician, clinical aromatherapist, chartered herbalist, and a nutritional consultant. She came to me with iridology already under her belt, but she said she had no confidence in the material or her ability to perform an accurate assessment. Upon completion of my course, she now feels very confident in her abilities, and she's excited to offer iridology to her clients. I see a lot of that. I see both new people coming into the class who've got very little or no background, but I also see people who've been trained and even certified through other schools and other programs, but they can't use it. They don't understand how to apply it. They're confused. And when they come into my course, we clear that up. I had a student many, many years ago, before I was a certified IPA instructor, who had reached out to me prior to becoming a student. And she said to me, I don't know why I should take your class. Tell me why I should. I'm already certified by this other person who was a big name in iridology at the time. And she said, I even have an iridology camera, but I've never even opened the box on the camera because I don't know how to use what I've learned. And I said, well, what I do is I teach you not only what iridology is, and I teach you the markings, but I teach you how to use it in a clinical setting. We practice that. So she signed up for the course. And after the second lesson, we were only 2 lessons in, she sent me an email and she said, I'm finally getting it. I opened my camera. I'm starting to take iris photos. So I was pretty excited about that. Today, however, we are going to answer 5 basic questions because we are introducing you to iridology. So the first one is, what is iridology? The second is, why should professionals specifically use constitutional iridology as opposed to some of the other iridologies that are out there? Number 3, why does iridology work? We're going to actually look at the anatomy of why this works. Number 4 is, what can we learn from iridology? What can it teach us? And number 5 is, how should iridology be used in a clinical practice? Do those questions sound like they are things that you want answers to? If they do, give me the word answers in the chat box. Are those the kinds of questions you want answers to as you start looking at iridology? Give me the word answers in the chat box. Answers. Thank you, Glynis. Thank you. And I would encourage you, if you've got other introductory level questions about iridology, throw those in the chat box as well. And if there's time, I will address those for you. So the first question is pretty easy. What is iridology? What is constitutional iridology? It is the study of the iris of the eye. Of course, the iris of the eye is the colored part of the eye. We pronounce this iridology because it is an iris. It's not iridology, it's iridology. And so as we look at iridology and we're looking at the iris is the genetic part of what we're looking at. This shows us the genetic blueprint of how this body is put together. And from there, we can extrapolate how it's going to respond in certain situations. As modern iridologists, we often also include the sclera. Now, the sclera is very dynamic. It changes. There are certain changes we see in the iris, but we don't see changes there because we added the right herbs or did the right nutrition. The changes have other causes. The changes that we see in the sclera are showing us where the hot spots are in the body, where the active places are in the body that are going to need some support. And with enough of the right kind of support, we can sometimes clear up some of these blood vessels that have built up and become very visible. So why should professionals use constitutional iridology? Well, first and foremost, it helps us to assess our clients holistically. Now, that's really important because remember we said the iris shows us the genetic blueprint of the body. It doesn't show us what is going on right now. The iris shows us what has been inherited from the past 3 to 4 generations. And as we understand what's been inherited, and then we understand what our client's symptoms are and what our client is currently doing with their health, we are able to understand why they have those symptoms. And we also understand then what questions we need to ask to get the best information to move forward with creating a protocol. So iridology is one piece of the assessment puzzle, but it helps to flesh out the information that our client gives us and that we can extract from our client as well. Iridology also helps us see how to balance using cleansing and nourishing. When we see, again, an iris, and we are matching that up with what our client's symptoms are and what their diet and lifestyle are, and their stressors and things like that, we are able to pull together a really clear picture that helps us to understand, is this a time to cleanse or is this a time to build? Now, I got to tell you, I think North Americans are cleanse happy. They seem to wear it with a badge of honor. Oh, I just completed a 3-week cleanse, right? And I'm thinking, that ain't nothing to be proud of. That's like saying, I spend most of my time running through my house with muddy shoes, and I just cleaned my house, and I'm going to run through my house with muddy shoes again. But I cleaned my house, right? I would far rather my clients, rather than wanting to do a cleanse, engaged in things on a regular basis that helps their body to keep up with getting rid of garbage, right? So we can avoid the big spring cleaning thing and just keep up to date on it, like vacuuming the rugs every week, washing the floors every week, right? So when we know how to do iridology in a clinical setting, we can see how to balance the body and whether we need to cleanse or nourish at this point in time. And that is not just what we see in the eye. Again, the eye is an assessment tool. It's not a crystal ball. And so it helps us to understand what questions we need to ask, right? And so this is really important. Iridology helps us to understand how to alter programs as warranted. And so what we see with this one is really interesting. I shoot iris photos of my clients typically annually. And I do that in part because I'm actually looking for sclera changes, but I'm also looking for those few kinds of changes that become more apparent with time. And more than that, I'm looking a fresh set of photos, even though there won't be much that's been changed there, except maybe in the sclera. Shooting a fresh set of photos allows me to come at my clients' problems with fresh eyes, no pun intended, because as our clients' health shifts, we can use those photos, and we can even use the same markings we used the last time to help us see what we need to change in the program moving forward. Okay, so we want to be looking at these eye photos frequently. We don't have to reshoot annually. I like to, mostly for the sclera, but the iris, we're going to look at those same markings over and over again. But because we understand how the body works, right? Because we understand the anatomy and physiology at a fairly deep level, it helps us then when we look at the eyes to understand clients' symptoms have shifted. Last time we met, I interpreted that marking and we used it to create this program. This time, I'm using that same marking to take us in a different direction. But that takes a deep level of understanding of iridology that you're not going to get out of a textbook or out of a 20-minute video. When we look at constitutional iridology, it helps us to avoid slicing and dicing or subdividing the body into minute parts. Most of the styles of iridology that are out there use iris maps that really do subdivide the body into itty-bitty sections. And I know you've all seen charts like this, and I'm not saying it's a bad chart. I'm just saying is subdivided too small. So when I look at this, if I am off, if I've got it tilted by even 1 or 2 degrees, these little tiny areas are shifted, right? So if I've got my eye photo and I wasn't exactly perfectly level, I might not recognize that shift, and I might actually, from a map like this, interpret the nose as actually being the tongue, or the frontal sinus as being the eye. And so slicing and dicing doesn't serve us well. Instead, in constitutional iridology, we are concerned about organs that have a metabolic process in the body. Like my arm doesn't necessarily have a metabolic process. I don't really care what it looks like in the eye. So we use a map that looks like this, where it has only organs and glands on it. We don't have anything on it that's not metabolically active. I'm not using iridology to be a crystal ball to try to guess when they had a surgery or broke their legs. I'm looking at it to understand, how does their metabolism actually work? How do their organs work? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And Liz, thanks for being here. Thanks for that sweet comment. She says she appreciates me. She's one of my students from days gone by. And so does that make sense? That if we really want to help someone with their health, we don't care about a hangnail on the finger. We care about, what is the liver's predisposition? What is the stomach's predisposition? How does what we see for the stomach actually maybe add to the health concerns our client has right now? That hangnail's not going to make a bit of difference, but the stomach could, or the liver could, or the kidneys could. If that makes sense, give me a big makes sense in the comments box. Here again is a picture of that iridology map that I just showed you. This is the one that I've developed based on an iris map that my constitutional teacher developed. I approached him. He developed his in the late 1980s, and we've learned a little bit about iridology since then. And so I approached him and said, can I use your map as a basis to update it in this way? And he said, please do. I've been meaning to do that. I haven't had time. So thank you to Bill Caradonna, the most amazing mentor I could ever have asked for. He has retired from iridology teaching, but he's a very busy naturopath if you happen to be in Seattle. Okay. And so we use a map that only shows the parts of the body that have a metabolic activity, right, that are going to affect how the body actually works. So why does iridology work? This is our little bit of anatomy and physiology, and I hope this is confirming things that you already learned in your A&P. The eyeball is the largest neural receptor in your body. We know that the iris itself has 28,000 nerve endings, but we haven't figured out what most of them do yet. We know that the eyeball develops embryologically at the very same time the brain and nervous systems do, because the eyeball is actually a direct extension of the brain. If there's any kind of a genetic glitch that the brain is aware of, it actually creates something different in the iris of the eye. And so the iris of the eye, therefore, shows us the genetic potentials of this body. We need to remember that the markings we see in the iris are not guarantees of problems. They are potentials. Okay, because we don't know, for example, when we just look at a photo and we don't have any background about the person, we don't know if this person has a really healthy lifestyle that is supportive of everything that is a weak link in their body, in which case those weak links may not be a problem. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe their eyes look like they should be robust and strong and healthy and able to ward off disease, but they don't get sleep. They drink 8 cups of coffee a day. They never eat real food. Everything is pre-packaged and junk food. And they sit around watching TV and playing video games all day. Well, they may have a strong body, but eventually with that kind of a lifestyle, that body will break down. So the eyes don't tell us what is wrong. They show us where the potentials are. And the potentials can be for strengths and for weaknesses. So we can see, oh, this organ and organ system appear to be really resilient. If you've got a symptom there, you put it there yourself. This organ, this body system appear to be less resilient. You don't have a problem there? Good for you. that means you're doing a lot of things right. Okay, and so we can use any kind of marking, whichever direction we need to support our clients. Let's do a quick case study and look at what iridology can teach us. So again, what we want to remember is that iridology teaches us about the inherent predispositions. So this set of eyes was a client who was in her mid-50s, and this set of eyes tells us that she spends a lot of time reacting with the sympathetic nervous system. So she spends a lot of time being on edge, in fight, flight, or freeze. Now, if she's actually very heightened, maybe she has learned to regulate that. Maybe she's learned that she needs to do a 30-minute meditation every day. And maybe she's got some bonsai plants, or she likes to garden, or she does needlepoint or whatever. And that helps her to be calm. But if she hasn't learned how to do that, we might want to support her overall with something like astragalus, right? And we might want to just help build her ability to handle stress while we are doing other things. These eyes also show us that this person is predisposed to having her liver run the show. Right now, from your A and P, you should remember that the liver does over 500 different things in the body, right? And so we need to know at least a few of those in order to understand what the liver might be doing that might not be appropriate here. And so with the liver, it might be she has some immune compromises. Did you know the liver is responsible for 10% of your immune response? Right? So she might have some immune issues. She might have some blood symptoms because the liver stores iron and it has a huge role in the formation of blood. She might have energy issues because the liver takes the carbs and it either processes them into, takes the glucose out of the bloodstream and processes it into glycogen or fat stores, or it converts them into triglycerides. That is really hugely involved with energy production in the body. Liver is key in hormonal issues because it has to create the cholesterol that we use to make the steroid hormones. Then it has to break those hormones down after they've done their job. So is it able to do all of those steps to help with hormones? Liver is a key player with allergies. So does she have allergic symptoms? Are there things we need to do to help her produce her own natural antihistamines? Liver plays key roles in the digestive processes, especially the digestion of fats, right? So how is that going? So we really have to understand anatomy and physiology in order to connect the client's symptoms with what we see in the eye to understand what is going on in her body to take her in the right direction. I like to say that the eyes teach us what questions to ask. So this client came in with two concerns. The first was recurring bladder infections, and the second was allergies. So of course, her eyes suggest, because of that liver thing, that she has an increased predisposition towards allergies and towards infections. And that may be because the liver might not be wanting to do its job properly. So what we want to do here then is work on a constitutional level, not on a surface level. We could give her a herb that would work on those bladder infections, but she'd need to keep taking it over and over and over again because that's not the root of the problem. That's the symptom. We could give her a herb that would help to mitigate allergic symptoms, dry up the sinuses, help the eyes not be so watery. But is that actually going into the liver? Is it actually helping to balance the liver out properly? And so we opted to not do either of those things. I chose to use golden seal with her because golden seal is a herb that works with the liver and it supports the immune system. That's really important to try to find things that address both of these. And that's, again, you have to understand how the body works, and you probably need a modality as well. And so we didn't, with doing that bit for the liver, we actually were able to have an impact on the allergies and on the immune system. And she didn't end up needing anything for the bladder because we went to the root of the problem, loved the liver a little bit, got it back on track, taught her a little bit of nutrition to help her keep the liver on track, and away she goes. She's just golden. So as I've done this, and I want to see how many of you have watched other YouTubes or Facebook things where people are doing iris analysis. If you've seen some of those, drop the word iris into the comments box. I'm asking this for a specific reason, so I just need to know if you've seen some of these assessments that have been done online. Not by me, but by other people. I don't actually do the free assessments online. So Farah has seen some of these. Okay. Fantastic, Farah. Thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. Anybody else seen any iris analysis done online or on YouTube videos? There's some really prominent iridologists out there that do them. All right. I want to know if you've heard people say things like, well, these eyes look toxic. You've got a lot of toxicity. You need to do a cleanse. You've got a congested liver. These eyes look unhealthy. Have you heard any of these things? Boy, these eyes don't look healthy. Have you heard any of these things? If you have, give me a yes in the comments box. If you've heard any of those things, Farah says, yeah, she's heard those things. You can't possibly know that by looking at the eyes. Can't possibly know it because these do not change in response to diet or supplements. Right? That's an important thing to recognize. They do not change in response to diet or supplements. Have any of you seen before and after pictures where it looks like where the before and after pictures look really different? If you have, give me the word pictures in the comments. Now they show a before and then they say, I did a 3-week all fruit fast and look at what my eyes look like now. Have you ever seen that? Give me the word pictures if you've seen that. You have, Farah? Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, Farah. I appreciate you playing with me in the sandbox here. One of the things you need to know is you can modify pictures in Photoshop, and it is not hard to do. When you understand that lighting is critical, consistent lighting, using the same settings on the camera is critical. To do a before and after, what you will notice is that there is virtually no difference, if any difference at all, in an iris from before to after. To create those before and after pictures, they've used different cameras, different lighting, and they've probably used some Photoshop filters and things like that as well. When we are looking at eyes, we always need to have a conversation with our client. This is a holistic thing. This isn't a crystal ball thing. This isn't a medical thing where I can look at a test result and say, you've got this disease. Nothing like that, because we never diagnose, right? Instead, what we are looking at here is what are the predispositions. Then we need to understand where the client's coming from and where they want to go so we can ask the right questions to help them get to their end point. We need a context to do an iris analysis, and that is a conversation with the client. This is where the training comes in, and this is where so many courses fall short. They only teach you markings. They would look at an eye like this and they would talk about how much mucus this person has and how much inflammation they probably have. They would say this collarette is too tight. They would give you all kinds of interesting lines, but they really aren't giving you any information that is useful. So again, the iris is inherent, the sclera is dynamic. Now in these photos, this is another client of mine, this collarette is very tight. We are never going to be able to move it. This is genetic. This is how this person was built. Their whole intestinal tract is tense. That does suggest an increased risk of things like constipation, poor energy production, but we have to ask the client, what is their experience? If this client is coming in for constipation, the eyes confirm why that's happening. We then know what we need to do, not to expand the collarette, to expand the intestinal tract, but just to help things move better, because we are never going to expand it. It is genetically tight. but we can help it function better within the range that it has inherited. So we always ask our client, we never tell them how to feel. This client may have figured out actually maybe years ago that dairy makes the constipation worse. So she might have learned to not have dairy. She might have learned that she needs to use alternate milk products like an almond milk or coconut milk. She may have learned that if she doesn't hydrate well enough, her bowel gets really sluggish again, and she ends up with rabbit turds, tiny little pellets. She may have learned that she needs to have a certain amount of plant matter in her diet every day to give the fiber to keep things moving well. She might have learned that that chicken constipates, or I don't know, but she might have figured it out. So I need to find out from her, what does she know about her body? I know what her eyes tell me, but what does she know about her body? That is our jumping off point from where she is, not from what the eyes say. We've got to combine what she knows with the eyes to know where we're going. Her eyes do suggest she's predisposed to allergies, particularly ones that affect the mucous membranes. So I specifically asked her about sinus symptoms, and she said that yes, she has spring allergies especially. And so that tells me a little bit more about what I need to do, because I know anatomy and physiology. I know that allergies are from a compromised mucous membranes, which she likely has based on her eyes, come from being overacidic, which she likely could be depending on her diet based on her eyes, and come from the liver not working well. Although I don't see, I do. I see some indications that liver genetically maybe wants to be a little bit cranky. So, and there's so many different markers that teach us about liver, for instance. And so doing all that, I wanted to start with the acid levels first, because if I could get her acid levels in check, I knew I could get a grip on the allergies. So for her, that meant looking at her stomach. And the stomach zone says she tends to not have enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach. That will always mean she has too much acid in the bloodstream, right? And again, that would be something that you would have probably learned in your anatomy and physiology. So because I knew that, I went directly to her stomach, built up her stomach acid, that reduced her blood acid, and seasonal allergies disappeared, right? So it's not one symptom means one thing. And this is what we teach in dynamic iridology. We teach how the symptoms correlate to the markings, how the markings interact with each other, how the markings teach us about the anatomy and physiology, and then how do we create a program for this client from that point. And we actually practice program creation in the scope of the course as well. So how should iridology be used in a clinical practice? It should be used to help guide our protocol creation. There are no two clients that have ever left my office with the same program. They may come in with what appears to be the same problem. Let's pick on polycystic ovarian syndrome, for instance. But when I look at their eyes and when I look at their diet and their lifestyle, there's a lot of differences. And so they need different programs, different paths to get to the end result they're looking for. This was a client in her mid-50s. She came into me with hot flashes. She was really pulled together. She had a really good diet. It was like 95% on track, which is amazing. She has a very holistic lifestyle. She knows when she needs downtime. She knows when she needs to exercise, and she really does a good job of balancing herself out. Now, her eyes take me in two different directions that have to come together at some point in time. The first one is I needed to understand what her nervous system was doing, her adrenals, her sympathetic response. I needed to know, how did she sleep? How does she regenerate? So if she's had a heavy work, she's a social worker, and so she can have some pretty heavy weeks. How does she regenerate after she's had a heavy week or a heavy day or a heavy client? How does she handle stress? How does stress show up in her body? So those were things that her eyes told me I needed to ask her. Then I needed to ask her about her liver. So the second category was about liver. Does she have problems digesting fats? Does she have any anger issues? Does she hold negative energy in her body that bubbles up to affect her at a later time? And so about those things, she said back to the nervous system, when she gets stressed, the hot flashes get worse. Well, that's not a big surprise. And she said on the liver and on the emotions and the anger things that no, she's really worked hard to learn how to let go of things. And she's pretty good at recognizing when she's got that negative energy, and she will take time to really work it through to get rid of it. So my recommendation was the only thing in her diet that was off was that she drank 1 cup of coffee a day. And so I asked her, knowing what coffee does in the anatomy and physiology, and especially of a postmenopausal woman, I asked her if she'd be willing to give that up for 10 days. And she said, absolutely yes. And when she came back for her next appointment, I asked her how'd it go. She said, it went well. When I cut out the coffee, the hot flashes disappeared. Now, I don't tell my clients what to do. I teach them, and I let them decide what they're going to do. And so I asked her next, what comes next? And she said, well, if you mean with the coffee. And I said, yeah, I mean with the coffee. And she said, it's the only thing I do that's not really healthy. And I really enjoy that coffee. And I think I'm just going to keep drinking it, and I'm just going to put up with hot flashes. Because I personally don't have anything that can counteract the impact of coffee in the body. It just needs to disappear in a case like this. And she decided she wanted to keep it, right? We know that the caffeine stresses the adrenals. It depletes the B vitamins. We know that the acid level of the coffee is going to mess with so many different chemistries in the body. Now, there's a lot of other markers that suggest issues with all these kinds of things, and with so many more. I mean, her eyes have got a lot of information in them. But did you notice I didn't go after anything that wasn't related to what my client asked for help with? Right? That's another thing we really focus on. In those online assessments, have you noticed how, because the person doing the assessment doesn't know anything about the client, doesn't know anything about their health goals, because the person's usually asked a really general question, the person doing the assessment gives a long list of everything that's wrong, and then a long list of everything the person needs to do. Have you seen that? If you have, give me the word overwhelm. Spell it the best you can, overwhelm, in the chat box. Have you seen those long lists? And while you're giving me the overwhelm in there, overwhelm, Vera says, yeah. How do you think the client feels? What do you think the client does with that? What do you think they do with it? They ignore it, Vera, yeah. They're overwhelmed with it all, absolutely. They don't know where to start. They feel like they're a royal train wreck, and they're just going to walk away, or they're going to pick the one thing they want to do and the one problem, and that remedy might not line up with that problem. And then they wonder, why are they not getting results? This is why in dynamic iridology, we focus on how do you assess the eye based on what the client needs. That's always your starting point. What is the client's goal? Start there, right? Give them a tight little program. With this client, we gave her methylated B vitamins because that was the right choice based on what I see in her eyes, and asked her to give up coffee. That was it. How doable is that? She was able to prove to herself that the coffee was the culprit. Now she's got information that she can work with. Is she willing to give up the coffee permanently, cut it down to maybe Sunday mornings, experiment with just doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday? What is she willing to do to see what impact she can have, right? I could have given her great, huge, long lists of things if I'd wanted to, but we keep it super simple. They get the results they want. They come back for the follow-up appointment. We have earned their trust. They know we're not out to sell them a $500 package of supplements. We're out, if we work with supplements, we're out to only work with the supplements that are appropriate to them right now. But now that we've got their trust and we've dealt with the first problem they wanted help with, now they're going to say, oh yeah, we got rid of that. And oh, by the way, can you help me with? And now we can look at the eyes again. What do the eyes tell us about this second thing they want help with? And we can keep rinsing and repeating for as long as our client needs help. Now, you know what's ultimately going to happen is this client is ultimately going to get to a place where they feel really good. It probably takes 5 or 6 months. And at that point, they're going to disappear and you won't hear from them for 4 or 5 years. And then as they age and their chemistry shifts and they need something to be tweaked, who will they think of? Who are they going to say, I wonder if she's still in practice? She helped me the first time and it was pretty easy. I'm going to see if I can find her again. They're going to look for you. They're going to come back to you and you will get to start them over because the journey is fresh. Take them through the process again and away you go. Does this make sense? Does this feel like it's maybe a really practical way to use this? If that makes sense, just give me an oh yeah in the comments box. Absolutely, Farah says, fantastic. Now, and Gladys is saying, oh yeah, love it. Yippers, love this, love this. I'm showing you these photos for a specific reason. These are the same client. This is back when I was shooting with an 8 megapixel camera. And this is when I got a new 24 megapixel with LED lighting. Same client. You notice that many of the markers are the same. He kind of disappeared for several years and then he came back. But notice the difference the camera equipment makes. If I was to put this right iris and this right iris up, I could fool most of the world and say, this is the before image. Look at how dull this iris looks. After I worked with him for 6 months, look at how bright his iris works. 95% of the people out there would not know the difference. They would buy that hook, line, and sinker. And so this is really, really important to remember. Photographic equipment makes a difference. Courtney, thank you so much. She's saying, hi, it's Courtney. I'm enjoying your information and the pace. Thank you. You are very welcome. And so this is why your photographic equipment is so critical, so critical. You can only compare apples to apples. You can't compare apples to oranges. It doesn't work. So let's look at the bottom photos. This is a client who, like I said, the top photos were 2014 with my old camera. The new ones were 2022. When he came in this time, being 8 years older, he's 5'11", 200 pounds. He had been diagnosed by his doctor as being pre-diabetic. His sugars were averaging 7 and as high as 7.5. Problem was he was taking metformin and that was giving diarrhea. They switched him to Glumetza and that was killing his potassium levels. He had elevated blood pressure, so he was on hydrochlorothiazide, which is a diuretic, and trandolapril. I am not a pharmacist. He was also on mylan-torvastatin, which is a statin drug, and he was on Viagra. Because when you're on the blood pressure meds, it kills the ability for a man to have an erection. Right, so this was one drug after the other to deal with the consequences of each drug. And so what we did with him, because he had all of these drugs, his glomerular filtration rate was a low normal, which suggests maybe early kidney disease. His hemoglobin A1C was 7.2. It should be below 5.7. Now the 7.2 says you are absolutely pre-diabetic, if not type 2 diabetic, right? And his cholesterol was coming down with the meds. Now, when we look at this and I look at his eyes, what I see is that he tends to, again, have elevated systemic acid, which is going to aggravate the kidneys. because the kidneys have to work hard to pull that out. Remember, think back to your A and P. And we know then also that the insulin resistance and the increased and the way his blood pressure is working is going to cause all kinds of problems. And the fact that he's got elevated cholesterol is going to cause all kinds of problems. And he actually had a bit of reflux. And that is usually from an under-acid stomach, not an over-acid stomach. So using what we see in his eyes with all the markers, things that I saw in the sclera, things that I saw in the whites, and I do teach sclerology in the dynamic iridology course because you just need it to balance out what's going on in the body right now. His wife is brilliant. She's been a client of mine for 25 years. He's been a client off and on, like I said, for about 10 years. And so we had to go back to square one. We got him to add more vegetables to his diet. That was really a low point, not many vegetables. We got him to add protein to his breakfast. And in those vegetables, we really focused on leafy greens. We also had him eliminate the coffee. So we were increasing vegetables, especially greens, eliminating coffee, and adding protein at breakfast. 3 fairly simple things to do. And then we also suggested doing a bit of exercise. He works as a security guard, and for a week at a time, he's out on the property walking. So that's great. That counts. The next week, he's in the office watching the camera screens. That's totally sedentary. So we suggested on those weeks that he's in the computer room that what he needs to do is get stretchy bands, because he could do stretchy band exercises while he's watching computers, right? What a great way to use that sedentary time. We did use with him some L-arginine to vasodilate and some berberine to reduce his insulin resistance as well. When he came back after 3 months, his hemoglobin A1C had fallen from 7.5 to 5.9. Absolutely miraculous. His doctor said, keep this up. The next time I see you, we're going to take you off your oral insulins. Fantastic. I noticed in that appointment that he was doing a lot of throat clearing. That almost always means acid reflux, or not acid reflux, but just reflux. So we tweaked his program. We added some hydrochloric acid to his digestive system, and that all totally cleared up that reflux. After 6 months, his doctor took him off the oral insulins. The blood pressure and cholesterol are getting lower. He's on the meds, but they're coming down even further. So the doctor is tweaking those prescriptions as well and reducing dosages. So we're getting where we need to go. It's a slow and steady process. As long as the client is seeing results, they'll stay on board because they want that end goal that they defined for you in the first appointment. I always like to remind them of what that end goal was. So I will always write down what the symptoms were that they wanted help with for the first appointment. And every appointment, I go back to that list and I'll say, how's the hemoglobin A1C? Have you had it checked lately? How's your blood pressure? Are you checking it daily? What's happening there? How's the cholesterol? Have you had that checked lately? And we'll go through everything to see how things are doing. Once he's able to come off the blood pressure meds, he will also lose the Viagra because his ability to perform sexually will restore, right? Which is great. I mean, so fun to see clients come off medications. So how do we use iridology in our offices? We use it to guide our questions we're going to ask. We are asking questions that are relevant to that client. We're not asking shotgun pattern questions. These are relevant to our client. We use them to create rapport because the client can tell these questions are directly related to them. That's important. And we use it to inform the recommendations we're going to make. We are running out of time. I'm not going to have time to do this last case study with you. I do just want to take a moment to introduce the dynamic iridology assessment system to you because it is the only live online fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, naturopaths, RNs, anybody who wants to have a holistic practice that has a good assessment tool. This, if you currently are, for example, an RN who does the functional nutrition, and you like to requisition blood tests, but they have to run through a doctor, that's going to take time. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying iridology is going to help you get started with your clients in that first appointment, right? It's going to help you figure out where to start, requisition the lab. So the labs take 3 weeks to come back. You've already got a jump start. You already know where you're headed, and you're already outlining programs that your client can begin to follow and start getting results even before the labs come back. How fantastic would that be? Our next course start date is June the 8th. Again, if you already have anatomy and physiology under your belt, that is a prerequisite. It must be a college level course. It cannot be a high school course. And if you want to talk about this course, if you want to have a conversation with me, a one-on-one, to see, is this course really a good fit for you? Is this what's going to help you take your practice to the next level? Whether you're a nutrition coach, a herbalist, an RN, an ND, anything like that, then I've put a link in the chat box. It's this link that you see on your screen. And hopefully you can copy and paste that. If not, you're going to have to write it down, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight. Let's have a chat. Let's see if this is a good fit. If it's a good fit, I will invite you to get enrolled for the June 8th start. If it's not a good fit, I'm happy to help you figure out what the next step should be in your process. This is Adam Zukowskis, naturopath and herbalist from the UK. He said he'd already had comprehensive iridology training in the past, and he can attest to the fact that dynamic iridology is well-rounded, covers all the necessary basics, embellished with my own experiences and discoveries. This course is taught from up-to-date information. People who give you long lists are teaching from outdated information that's been disproved. And it's clearly apparent how much work she puts in, yada, yada, yada. I do stay up to date. That's critical. And he mentions the fact that we actually have mentoring sessions, 2 mentoring sessions a month that are open to all of my students and graduates, should they have questions or cases they need help with. So dynamic iridology is taught through 20 live 2.25-hour web classes, small group cohorts, no more than 10 students per class. So when the June 8th class has 10 people enrolled, we go to a waitlist situation. Every class is recorded for playback on demand. I've had many students who live in time zones where getting to class is not going to work. They do the class very successfully by watching the recordings. Live group mentoring twice each month. We call that office hours. We have a student and alumni group on the MeWe platform. It's like Facebook, only they don't call your personal information and they don't monitor what we say. So that's why we're in MeWe. You will also receive a 225-page digital textbook. You get to download the textbook and it's yours to keep. We have 45 pages of digital downloadable study notes. We love to call them the cheat sheets. That's included in your course. And we include the certification process to become the mentoring that's required to become certified with IPA. So again, racing through this end part, if you're interested in learning more, finding out if this is for you, if you want to learn, if you want to be taught in a way where you not just learn the markings, but you learn the skills, you go through cases and we practice. What questions do you ask? What does this eye teach you about those symptoms? How do you create a protocol for this eye? What would the first protocol be? What would you maybe do in the second appointment? What would you maybe do in the third appointment? If that's the kind of training, live training that you're going, yeah, that's what I think I need, I want to know more, then schedule a time for us to chat. I do have limited times available in the course of a week because I do have a caseload of my own and I do a lot of teaching. So if you're interested, grab a time and let's chat. Any other questions here? Anything else that I can answer for you in the next 2 minutes before I jump off to get ready for my next class? Not seeing anything come through. You are very welcome, very welcome. I look forward to speaking with you in the near future. Oh, Courtney, how is this work different from Bernard Jensen's work? Entirely. Bernard Jensen's is the old style. The constitutional, and we love Bernard, don't get me wrong, but his eyes say, or his work says the eyes change based on diet. And supplements, I can tell you in the 4 decades I've been at this, I've never seen eyes change for that. And so what we know is that his work stopped developing. All the research was going on in Europe, and during the Cold War, he didn't have access to that. So we worked with what he had, and we love him for doing that because it kept iridology alive. But once we started getting information from the countries that were doing research, we learned that it had moved so forward, so much more information now. And so it's very different from the Jensen style. Jensen is long lists of what's wrong, long lists of what to do. Jensen is don't laser in on what the client's problem is right now. And so constitutional has brought it a long way to be much more user-friendly and much more effective in the long run. Glynis, I look forward to chatting with you. And Courtney, I'd love to chat with you too. So take down that link and let's have a conversation. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.